Number 5. Cutscene. So this story involves a player who logged in to play some Fortnite, and when they logged in, a cutscene started that was unrecognized by the player. This cutscene started with some screams, and they noticed the Recon Expert skin with Jonesy beside her. So it all started when a player logged in to play some Fortnite. The game started up with a new cutscene that was unrecognized by the player. The cutscene started with screams. Next, the player noticed that they saw the Recon Expert skin with Jonesy beside her. This was followed by the Skull Trooper skin torturing a Warpaint skin. Renegade Raider then appeared with the player themselves in handcuffs on screen. They announced that they would be punished for not being OG, and that the punishment for this would be death. Next, the player saw Renegade Raider pick up the Scythe pickaxe and come down with it, covering the screen in blood. Since then, the player decided to switch to Minecraft and has had nightmares about the event. Every time the player wakes up from one of these nightmares, they notice a pain in their neck. The player actually suggests if you're playing Fortnite and there is a new cutscene without a new season of the game coming out, that you uninstall the game, or you could become the next of the OG's victims. Number 4. Dead Bear. This story starts with a sunny day outside. This player jumped onto Fortnite to play a solo match. They started the game as they normally do, mining trees, and in the distance noticed a little wooden house. They entered the house thinking hopefully there'll be some weapons in here, and fortunately did find a submachine gun. When they turned, they noticed there was someone standing there in a pink bear skin under the username Dead Bear, and they killed them. As soon as they had killed them, the screen turned to static for 5 minutes. After that, the game turned back on and the players saw their character. They watched as they could not control the avatar, and it ran to the edge of the map and jumped off a cliff, eliminating themselves. The screen then turned off, and when it came back up, there was a poem on it that read, "Roses are red, violets are blue, one is dead, and so are you." Freaked out, they decided just to go to bed. However, on their way to bed, what they noticed as they looked out the window was Dead Bear was standing outside holding a knife. Number 3. Not a noob. This player decided to play some Fortnite because he was bored. Spoiler alert, a lot of these creepypastas start with people playing Fortnite, obviously. The player themselves was level 41 at tier 34, so they were not really considered a noob, though they were known for being a camper, which in and of itself kind of makes you a bit of a noob when it comes to gaming. As they logged on, they looked to see if any of their friends were online, but unfortunately they were not. Just then their cell phone rang. They noticed it was a random number, and so they ignored it and didn't answer it. As they're playing the game, they ended up to get to a pretty impressive 13 kill streak. But the weird thing that they noticed was the last player they had killed in the game matched the random number on the phone that had been calling them. The other weird thing about this last character that they had killed in the game was that they had a creepy smiling man skin that they weren't familiar with, which was also wearing the same outfit as the player was wearing in real life. Just then their phone rang again with the same number. The person was obviously freaked out but decided to answer it. When they answered it and said hello, the response they got was, "I'm not a noob, I'm not a noob, I'm not a noob, I'm not a noob, you hear me." Obviously freaked out, they decided to hang up. When they looked back to their screen, they had noticed they had been killed by a player named I'm Not a Noob. At this point, they were so scared that they decided to just turn off the game and hide under their covers. Just then, their phone rang again. They tried to ignore the phone ringing, but it would not stop. They reached out from under the covers, grabbed their phone, and answered it. The same random number that had been calling them before had called them again, and when they answered the phone, they said frustratedly, "What do you want?" And the person answered with, "I want you to look out the window." When this player came out from underneath the covers and looked out the bedroom window, they noticed the same character from the game in real life. The same creepy, disturbing smile and wearing literally what they were wearing. Hesitantly, they asked into the phone, "What do you want?" And the person answered with, "All I want is to play Fortnite with you, and if you don't, I will be here, watching you, killing you." Freaked out, the player decided to call the police, but when the police came, they apologized, saying there was nothing wrong and that their brother had just played a trick on them. This player then went back online to play Fortnite, but repeated the phrase throughout the game, "I'm not a noob, I'm not a noob, I'm not a noob, you hear?" Did that player become the other person? Who knows? knows? Number 2, last one standing. While this player was waiting for the babysitter to show up at their house after their parents went out, they decided to go up to the room and play Fortnite. When they got into the match, they noticed that everyone had the Dark Knight skin. All of a sudden, all of the lights turned off in the house. Looking around in the dark confused, they noticed a notification pop up on their screen with a message from an anonymous user that read, "Why'd you do that?" Understandably scared, the player decided to go downstairs to lock the door. As soon as they locked the door, there was a knock at it. For some reason, they decided to answer the door. I wouldn't, but that's how the story goes. So they answered the door, but there was no one there. There was, however, a letter. They took the letter, opened it, and read it. It said, "Don't lock, don't look, don't lock, don't look, don't lock, don't look," over and over and over, with the last word on the letter being hide. At this point, completely freaked out, they decided to run upstairs and hide under their bed. All of a sudden, they felt a breath on the back of their neck. When they turned around to look behind them, they were greeted by a bunch of pairs of red eyes. This player's parents came home to realize that their child had disappeared and was never heard from again. Dun dun dun. Number 1, last right. Okay, prepare yourself guys, because this one is really scary. This player expressed that they decided to try Fortnite randomly one day and became completely obsessed. They put all of their money into the game, which when you think about it is strange because Fortnite is a free game, so how would they do that? Well, they confessed that they became obsessed with digital swag, spending tons and tons of money on digital swag. All of their money to the point that they actually maxed out thousands of dollars on credit cards. Wanting to focus on Fortnite 100% of the time, they also decided to quit their part-time job and quit college. At this point, they were the leader of a guild with over 100 members that was called the Masons. One of the members on the team, who was actually known as being one of their elite players, was Dr. Gruesome 666. The player in this story expressed that they were a little bit weirded out by DG, as they call him, short form for Dr. Gruesome 666, but they obviously overlooked a lot of the weird interactions they tended to have with them because they were such an amazing player on the guild. One of the things that they expressed concern over is sometimes when they were playing the game with DG, they noticed instead of saying anything, there would just be a lot of heavy breathing over the mic. But the player was really good, so they just wrote it off as being kinda weird. One day, DG told the player that they actually were going to leave Fortnite. Being one of the best members on the guild, the player was obviously concerned about DG leaving and asked why they were thinking about leaving Fortnite. DG told them that they had this new game that they had heard about, which was on the dark web, called Last Right. Last Right was apparently a Fortnite copy, but was much more violent and gruesome than Fortnite. The game itself involved parallel locations and maps, but ones that were spun as being a lot more dark, including a parallel version of Greasy Grove, which was actually called in Last Right Disemboweled Drive. The player also said that they were super excited to be playing with a new avatar in the Last Right game, which was called the Abortionist. They described this avatar as looking like a zombie with a ripped bloody smock, and for their back bling having a dead fetus. Pretty gross, right? The player at this point said that they did not believe DG and called them out as being a liar. DG then got super impassioned and said that they had actually only brought it up because they thought the player would be interested, and if they weren't interested, obviously they weren't as hardcore of a Fortnite player as they thought they were. Unable to pass up on anything Fortnite at this point due to their addiction, the player then agreed to actually play the dark web version Last Right. DG helped them out, sending them messages and getting them all the things they would need to start playing. Once they were ready to download the game themselves, DG sent them to a random numbered website, which if you're familiar with the dark web, this is how it works, a bunch of anonymous URLs. It started to load, and the player was greeted with a screen that asked them if they would like a male or female avatar. They decided, I guess I'll select male, clicked that, and as soon as they clicked that, they noticed the game start. They thought, wow, the graphics here are really good. It must be like 1080p or something like that. There was a naked man strapped to a table. All of a sudden, DG's avatar, which looked pretty real at this point, greeted the player with their real world name. DG then went on to list where they lived and all of these personal details that they knew about them. At this point, the player was pretty concerned and pretty confused, but it got worse. DG actually showed them their back bling, which appeared to be a real world dead fetus. And from there they grabbed a sharpened knife off of an operating table on screen. They then used the knife to cut off the naked man's face, put it on their own face themselves, and proceeded to ask if the player enjoyed their new avatar. Certainly freaked out, the player said, "I'm done with this, I'm gonna call the police on you, this is not okay," and was actually just traumatized. However, DG told them that they might want to think that through, as they were already on their way to grab a new avatar. They also confessed that the new avatar that they were about to go get was someone that the player may know, and revealed that the name of the avatar they were getting was Brad. Brad was actually the name of the player's brother, so obviously at this point they're freaking out. They decided to check their phone and started to dial Brad's number when they noticed they had a new video from him. They checked out the video sent through text and saw Brad with tape over his mouth and a black eye. At this point, DG asked the player to send a message along to Brad. The player asked what message it was that DG wanted them to send, and DG responded with that they should tell Brad goodbye.
In at number 5, Game Over. This Scary Fortnite Creepypasta you've never heard of is based on a story written by a user named I'mXShy on Reddit's Creepypasta page. The protagonist says about a month and 2 weeks ago his friend had completely disappeared. He was no longer at school and hadn't logged in to play Fortnite in a really long time. Once home from school, the gamer decides to squeeze in a quick game of duos before his parents got home. But while waiting for the game to fill in a teammate, he was shocked to find that his missing friend filled in the spot. On the other end of the mic, he could hear sobbing, and finally his friend spoke, "Kyle, why did you join? Why? He tried asking him what was wrong, but all his friend said back was, "I trust you with my life." Then the game just started. They dropped into Pleasant Park and immediately began battling it out with little to no time for talking about where exactly his friend had been. Out of nowhere, his friend gets sniped and drops immediately, and just as Kyle attempts to save his friend, he yells out, "Don't, we have no time, please just survive." This distraction soon leads to Kyle getting sniped as well, and suddenly he feels this odd rush of wind blow from his television as an ear-piercing shriek blares through his headset. The protagonist falls out of his chair as if some invisible entity had pushed him over. Confused, rattled, and disturbed by this, he runs over to his friend's house to get some answers. Kyle knocks on the door and the woman answers. He says, "Who are you and where's Riley?" The mysterious woman's eyes were devoid of emotion as she said, "No one here is named Riley. Your game is just over." In at number 4, We Eliminated You. The following story is one that will certainly make you double check that your home is safe before playing a game of Fortnite. This story is based on the creepypasta written by a user called 34MatthewsHD on the Reddit Creepypasta page. The protagonist first boasts that they usually average 20 plus kills a game with 67 victories overall. However, on this occasion, they were even surprising themselves at how well they were doing. This wouldn't be a creepypasta though without some strange happenings going on. He said that after dropping it into a solo match, he was really thrown off by the fact that literally everyone in the game were wearing the Cuddle Bear skins, and all had the same name, We Eliminated You. At first he thought he must have accidentally found his way into some glitched server and was playing with a bunch of hackers, which it's not every day that this kind of thing happens, so he kept playing. And as I mentioned earlier, he was racking up kills fairly quick, 10 kills in fact within the first few minutes of playing. Avoiding the majority of the conflict for most of the game, he made it to the top 3, but after being eliminated, he received an odd message from one of these We Eliminated You players, and it was just a photo of his house. More terrifying than that was the fact that he could see himself through the window in the photo. He rushed to the window to see a man wearing a Cuddle Bear mask standing outside in the rain while holding a bloody knife. He quickly called 911 and found a closet nearby to hide it, and while hiding he realized that he had forgotten to lock his back door. Through the slats in the closet, he could see the masked man creep into the home and proceed to smash his PS4. That might be the scariest part of this whole story. The man then slowly made his way to the closet where he was hiding, although right before he could open it, flashes of blue and red filled the home as a police siren wailed. The man was then tackled to the ground by police officers, and as they dragged him away, he yelled, "If you play Fortnite again, we will eliminate you." In at number 3, Squad's Fill. This creepypasta you've never heard of was found deep down in the darkness that is the Reddit Creepypasta page and was written by user Next Page Creepypastas. They begin by saying it was a regular Friday night just like any other. It was the protagonist and his other 2 friends starting up some Squad's Fill on a game of Fortnite. They had played trios before but thought, hey, what was the harm in adding in a 4th person? A player soon joined that went by the name of Nightly Player. At first they said nothing, and coming from their mic was mainly static. But while the game was starting, they could hear the player saying in a rather terrified tone, "Please let me live." Sketched out by this, the other players asked where this Nightly Player wanted to land, and they could hear another voice subtly say, "Tilted," as then the kid's voice, again filled with fear, squeaked out the words, "Tilted." They dropped in, but the player wasn't moving, and suddenly the squad could hear faint crying and then a loud sound of a gun coming from the other player's mic. All 3 players froze, and before they could ask what that was, a man spoke through the mic and stated with authority, "He's gone. He didn't obey." In at number 2, Evil Team Leader. The following story is based on a creepypasta written by a user named Deadeye Echo. They explained that upon buying the Cuddle Team Leader skin, strange things started happening. They were fairly proficient at playing Fortnite and usually did pretty well, but as soon as they had this skin on, their game seemed to get better. And after finding a tactical shotgun, they were able to knock off 5 players within just the first 2 minutes. Anyone who's ever used that gun just knows how impressive that really is. Within minutes of arriving at Dusty Divot, the same thing happened, this time 8 kills in even less time. It felt as though the game was on autopilot. Everything from building to eliminating other players was just so much easier. He didn't mind either because it meant that he was one step closer to a victory royale. Finally, it was down to just 4 players including the protagonist, and while watching 2 players fighting it out, he was sniped from another direction. Although his player went down for just a moment, miraculously his health regenerated within seconds and he was back on his feet. The Cuddle Team Leader had stood back up as the sniper had moved in closer to finish what he had started. His player, again controlled by something else, whipped around and no-scoped the oncoming attacker. Now, it was just 1v1. Just before he was about to take out the final player, the protagonist feels his fingers go numb, causing him to drop his controller onto the floor. However, his character was still moving around. The Cuddle Team Leader takes out the final player and takes the victory, although our protagonist still couldn't move a muscle. He sat and watched the victory animation play on the screen. This was supposed to be a time for celebrating, yet for whatever reason, he couldn't move. He then receives an odd message from a player called the Evil Team Leader. It simply reads, "Now that you know what it feels like to win, I will show you how it feels to lose everything." According to news reports, the boy had suffered a massive stroke while playing the game, and after making a baffling recovery from this, the boy returned to his home to find that he had been permanently banned from Fortnite under the suspicion that he had been using an aimbot. Last but not least, in our number 1 spot, The Raven's Lullaby. This final story is written by user DeathKnight23 on the Creepypasta page and involves some strange synchronicity with the Raven's skin and our protagonist. They loved the male version of the skin, but they felt the female version just lacked anything interesting. Even saying out loud to himself, "Such a wasted opportunity to make a good skin." As soon as he said that though, this song started playing with the words being, "The children are wailing, the raven is calling, do not fret, do not cry as I sing you the raven's lullaby." Startled by this, he looked around the room to see where this song could be coming from, but to much of his dismay, he found nothing. Was the game glitching or was he going insane? Wanting a break from Fortnite, he decided to take a quick nap. Now, deep in a dream, he was flying as if he was a raven, and the song continued to play. "The children are wailing, the raven is calling, do not fret, do not cry as I sing you the raven's lullaby." He felt equally in control and out of control at the same time. He could fly, but at the same time he had an insatiable appetite for destruction. Down below, he spotted 4 kids walking into a home, and this is the moment that he lost all control. The raven's skin now merged with his own, instructed him to eliminate the children. He approached the home singing the raven's lullaby again as he entered, and without hesitation he clawed at the children, attacking them while playing Fortnite. One manages to run out of the home, and as the door slams shut, the protagonist wakes up from his deep sleep. In the distance, he can hear his father watching the news as the broadcaster says, 4 children attacked today in a random break and enter. 3 of the kids died later in hospital from their injuries. Authorities are saying the claw marks across their necks appear to be from some sort of bird. The police also added that 1 child had managed to escape and claimed moments before the attack the children could hear a song that went like this: "The children are wailing, the raven is calling, do not fret, do not cry as I sing you the raven's lullaby."
Number 5. The Forgotten Location. Many people know that Fortnite Battle Royale has changed over time, with different seasons of the game changing maps and content, which means that many will not remember the location that this player recalls. This was a map called Torture Town. The player claims that this location only existed for about a week in the game in Season 0. The player claims that the location was hated for a few reasons, one being that the loot was terrible, but the other being that it was an ultra-realistic torture house. The player tells of a time they remembered dropping there with their friend Jack. The location was usually reported by other players as being far too dangerous, as it was covered in spike traps, which would also spawn all over the place. And if you were ever there for longer than 5 minutes, it would randomly generate you somewhere else. This map was covered in corpses, many of whom came with weapons that were loaded, which was odd. Even more odd was that the guns were almost fully loaded, but not quite. They were missing exactly one bullet. And many of the corpses on the map looked as though they had their heads blown off. The other strange thing is the map was super glitchy. If you died randomly, it would say that you took the L or you got slaughtered, and that's when you were not eliminated by another player. The player claims that this map no longer exists, but that it was also never meant to. So be warned, if you ever find yourself in Torture Town, you are now in a part of the game that does not really exist. Number 4, Chicken. This player was playing a game with his friend Alex. The two were in a game where 15 people were left and the player really felt like they were going to win. There was lots of good loot in the game, so they went to a nearby house in Salty Springs to loot it. They went down to the basement, but what they saw was something the player had never seen in game before. They found a secret room in the basement with a chicken suit. The chicken suit was lying in the center of what looked like a ritualistic symbol painted on the ground in blood. The suit itself was also covered in blood and surrounded by bloody buckets of chicken. The buckets looked as though they had been left there by worshippers of the suit, an offering of some twisted kind. The two friends were a little alarmed by this. It didn't seem like it was something that was supposed to be in the game at all. They left the house and continued searching houses in the nearby area. All the other houses appeared to have the same secret room. They decided to leave Salty Springs for Retail Row, now starting to get pretty freaked out. The player at this time felt like someone was following them in game, but shook it off as they didn't notice any other players doing so. The game was now down to 10 players. The pair took out another duo group, but at great cost to their health. They didn't have any medkits on them, but used a couple minis to patch up as best they could. As they started moving toward higher ground, the player noticed that in front of them was the chicken suit. It was holding one of the bloody buckets in one hand and a gun in the other. The chicken suit shot at Alex, and his friend just disappeared from the game. He called out into his mic, "Hey Alex, are you still here?" but heard no answer from him. The player shot again and again at the chicken suit, but none of his hits seemed to take any effect. The player decided to exit the game and just turned off his Xbox. Just then he heard a knock at the front door. He opened the door to see the chicken suit standing before him. Number 3, the unknown player. It was 12 AM when this player hopped on to play some Fortnite. They clicked on 50s but forgot to click no fill, so it ended up as a squad game. The player only had one other person on their team, oddly enough. The player asked the other person if they had a mic, but assumed they didn't as they heard no response. Surprisingly, the two of them ended up winning the match, with the player getting 4 kills and their silent teammate getting an impressive 15. Having enjoyed the match, the player tried to look up his teammate so he could send him a friend request and they could play again in the future. But when they searched the username, it came up as no results. This was a little odd. The player began to worry that something strange was happening when they received a message from a random user inviting them to play 50s no fill. While in the lobby, the player noticed this new teammate didn't have a mic as well. At the end of the game, the user that had invited the player seemed to actually change names from what they were originally to the username of the previous teammate with the 15 kills. Even more disturbing was during the game the player died, and they thought their game must have been glitching at the time because a window popped up saying, "We have 666 kills. Do not leave the match or else." The next day, the player received a letter in the mail from the apparently non-existent user. They immediately destroyed it and have not heard or seen from the other player since. Number 2, the bloody skin. Getting home from school and getting bored of his homework, the victim of this Fortnite creepypasta decided to fire up their Xbox and get playing. The Fortnite loading screen started up, but it was strangely all red. Still, the player decided to continue playing. He was retreating from another player crouching behind a wall when he noticed another player coming at him and a skin that he had never seen before. The skin seemed covered in blood. His clothes were dripping red, and he was holding a giant bloody butcher knife. The player was frozen with fear. Suddenly, the bloody avatar rushed at them and stabbed them in-game, killing them. He heard someone whisper his name behind him, Andrew. Spinning around, he saw the same bloody skin from the game standing behind him in the darkness of his room. Terrified, he listened as the skin spoke in a deep voice, threatening him to win a match of solos or die, brandishing the same bloody knife from in-game. Andrew speedily turned around and jumped back into the game. All sorts of skins were in the game, Sidewinders, Cuddle Team, Calamities, but all of them were just covered in stab wounds with slashed, bleeding necks. The game came down to him and one other player. Andrew shot at the player and hit, but somehow his hit did not damage. Not possible, he muttered as he watched the other player headshot him. Terrified, he slowly turned around to look behind him, but the bloody skin was gone. Andrew hasn't played Fortnite since. Number 1. Maddox. This story warns of the dangers not just of playing Fortnite, but of playing any game online, or doing anything online for that matter. The player was having a sleepover at his home with his best friend, and excited because his basement had 2 TVs, so the two could play Fortnite together. His friend brought over his Xbox, and they got playing. The two squatted up and decided to play some PvP battles. While in game, they noticed a player named Maddox1244, who was talking on a mic. He had a very high-pitched voice, and what sounded like a really low-quality mic. The two friends decided to start talking to him, but before they could start a conversation with him, he immediately asked for their Instagram usernames. The two claimed they didn't have Instagram, smartly not wanting to share their personal information online. But Maddox would not back down, and kept demanding their Instagram usernames. It got so annoying that it was messing with their in-game focus, so the players decided to mute Maddox. They continued to play and got to a point where Maddox had been eliminated, but was still in the game chat. Curious to see what he was saying, they decided to unmute him. Maddox was screaming at the top of his lungs. He demanded their social security numbers and personal information. The player's friends started to get freaked out and declared that he was going to mute Maddox again, and the other player agreed. But the two friends found themselves unable to mute him. They smashed the controller, mute, 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 but it would not respond. Maddox started yelling obscene threats at the duo. They were at this point so distracted and freaked out that they died in the game and ended up back in the lobby. Oddly, they noticed while they once both had a decent amount of Fortnite currency, they now both had 0. They tried to shrug this off as maybe an in-game glitch and that it would probably be resolved later. Instead, they decided to play some other games for a while. But when they went to their Xbox game library, all the games they had were named Maddox. The player looked down to their phone where they had an Instagram notification. They had a new follower, Maddox1244, and a new message from them. The message read, "Found ya. Scared yet?" Suddenly, the player got a video call from Maddox. Reluctantly, he answered his phone and was greeted by Maddox, his face partially illuminated by a single flashlight. "Scared yet?" he asked as his body twitched and twisted in an almost inhuman way. His eyes rolled back into his head and he began to convulse and scream. The player's mom came downstairs and urged him and his friend to keep it down. He promised they would and apologized, not wanting to admit what was really going on. He then noticed another video call from Maddox, but despite not even answering it, it just went through. In the corner of the screen, he noticed a window. Maddox was outside. Suddenly he realized it was his living room window, and that it was open. He ran to his living room with his friend close behind him. Both of them were freaking out and close to tears. They ran into the living room and slowly creeped over to the window. There, outside in the dark, was a boy, twitching. They screamed. The player's mom and dad both came running into the living room and also saw the boy standing outside. They immediately called 911. By the time the police got there, there was no trace of Maddox, and his Instagram and Xbox account seemed to have vanished.